slowly. What do you think, Juan?
Yes, Hakan, I think that you can
Yeah,
start.
and then I believe the ones that would like to join later on, who they can join, and they can also re-listen the video recording. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for participating to the webinar about gridded population sampling. I know for some of you it is early morning, for some of you late in the evening, some of you it's afternoon or lunchtime. And we will not make it too long. We will try to finish the entire presentation within 1 hour time, including the questions perhaps. Today's topic is about using information technologies for sampling, statistical sampling, sample selection, sampling design related purposes. As you know, if there is no sampling frame or the frame is not reliable, it is extremely difficult to design any statistical survey. And it is also a fact that for most of the world, it is nearly impossible, or it is very difficult to find a reliable household frame or business frames. However, there are now solutions by using the information technologies. Only 30 years ago, when I first started using satellite imagery and GIS solutions, the satellite imagery was extremely expensive. It was not possible to use satellite imagery in sampling related purposes, but now it is even free. 10-meter resolution satellite imagery is free, and it is collected every 3 days, such as sentinel imagery. So you can use now the information technologies in purpose to your according to your purposes, such as development of the sampling frame for household surveys or firm surveys. Furthermore, it is also possible to reach the grid level data. We will explain what is grid in a few minutes. Grid level data, which includes estimated population for entire world. And it is also free. Now, by using all these information technologies together with statistics, it is possible to conduct reliable statistical surveys where there is no reliable sampling frame or no frame at all. After this short introduction about the subject, I would like to introduce you the speakers. Today we have Mr. Juan Munoz. He is the founder of Sistemas Integrales, based in Chile. He is actually one of the most well-known statistician in the area of sampling, data collection, data analysis worldwide. He is currently giving consultancies to World Bank in many countries. He will soon also mention you. I cannot list the name of the countries he worked so far, but I know that he worked over 100 countries until today. He has been involved in World Bank Living Standards measurement study since its inception in 1983. Furthermore, he has taught statistics in universities in UK, Chile, and USA. The second speaker is Mr. Bayram Samet Şahin. He is one of the founder of UDA Consulting based in Turkey in 2009. He holds master degree in statistics, and he is currently doing his PhD in social research methodologies with a focus on grid sampling. And I am glad to see that his PhD advisor, Mr. Sinan, is also here. And myself, I am statistician as well. I hold a master degree in remote sensing and GIS. I have worked as GIS and sampling or survey expert, research expert in different organizations, including United Nations for 15 years. And I designed surveys by using GIS and satellite imagery in many countries. After this introduction, I leave the floor to Mr. Juan Munoz to present the webinar. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Hakan. Yes, as Hakan said, until very few years ago, we were used to adopt what I will call the standard approach to household survey sampling, which consisted of two-stage sampling using small area units in the first stage and households in the second stage. For both stages, we required a sample frame. And the sample frame for the first stage typically was a list of enumeration areas generated by a recent census. So we were dependent on a census for the first sampling stage. In the second sampling stage, the sample frame, the standard sample frame, was a complete list of households developed, normally developed specifically for each survey as a part of the survey fieldwork. An updated list of all households only in the selected areas, in the areas that had been selected in the first stage. And that was our standard approach, but that standard approach not necessarily was easy to implement. The problems, the typical problems that we faced and we still face are what happens when we don't have a recent census. Normally countries do the censuses every year or so. So, you know, if we are lucky, we may have a recent census. If not, we may not. And even if the census is recent, it may not be so easy to access the list of enumeration areas that we need as a sample frame. Also, in the second stage, can you go back, Samet, please? Also, in the second stage, sometimes we may face problems in conducting the updated list of households, because it is an operation that takes time, it is expensive, and sometimes we cannot do it because of time or budget constraints. So those are the problems that we had been facing with the standard approach to sampling for household surveys. For business surveys, it was more or less the same situation. What we want to present to you now is the alternatives, that we now can use as a result of recent technologies. For the first sampling stage, Samet, you can, yes. For the first sampling stage, we can use, and this is what we will see later in this webinar, we can use a technique called grid sampling, which consists of using, instead of area units defined by the census, area units defined in some other way that we will see. This is called grid sampling. For the second sampling stage, we can also use techniques based on GIS, of the use of GIS technologies to support the second sampling stage. Not to replace the household listing operation, but to make it much easier. Okay. In grid sampling, the primary sampling units are cells. We call them cells. And cells are rectangular areas with population estimates. So the primary sampling units are areas, but they are not previously defined areas that result from a census. They are areas that are defined, normally rectangular areas, defined by their coordinates in the universal coordinate system. So that the sample frame consists of a grid of millions of such cells that can be available from various providers worldwide. In that picture, you can see, one such grid. It's only a 4x4 grid with population estimates. But of course, in the planet, there are millions of them. In the final stage, as usual, for the household survey, we will have households. And the sample frame ideally should also be the list of all households. I want to insist in this point that the fact that in the final stage we need to somehow go to the field to develop a list of households. This is something that we used to do before and we still need to do now. Next, please, Samuel. The full list of households is still the ideal, but we may use techniques to make it better and easier. And sometimes, with grid sampling, we may also need some intermediate stages that are the result of some of the features of grid sampling that we will discuss later this morning. Okay, so you may be wondering, where do those grids come from? As Hakan said, we are fortunate at this moment in that there are providers of such grids for the whole planet for free. And actually, not only one provider, there are many. There is a list of some of the providers that we know. There may be others. But as you can see, those providers, all of them are related to international agencies or universities. The names of the frames that they provide, the acronyms, are there. And it is important to know the acronyms because this is the way that in the business we normally refer to them. And in the final column, you can have an idea of the resolution level of the grids that they provide. Normally, the grids are rectangles, often squares, and as you can see, there is some variation in the size of those grids. Some of them are very, very narrow, like 30 meters. Others are a little wider, like almost 1 kilometer. And of course, using one of those grids or the other, choosing which is the best is a delicate thing. One may be tempted, oh, of course, the best is the narrower, the one that gives me the final possible resolution. But as we will see later, this is not necessarily the best option. The best option depends a lot on the specific problem that we have at hand. It is basically country-specific. How do those providers develop the grids? Yeah. Okay, of course, in this webinar, in a few minutes, we cannot give you all the details. That would be impossible because the technologies that are behind these grids are very, very complicated. They are not easy. Normally, the grids come from a variety of sources. What you can see on the left, satellite imagery, of course. Yeah. Often not the satellite images that you are used to see in Google Earth and other satellite maps. There are also satellite imagery that focuses on how does the Earth look like from the air, from the satellite in the night. Because in the night, with the lights are an indication of human settlements. So one of the sources of information are nighttime lights. And of course, other sources such as, well, information from the land cover, roads, that can be available are also a part of the cocktail. Yeah? And when they are available, population estimates from other sources, either demographic projections or censuses when we have them. So those providers put all those things in one black box or gray box, where they use a wide variety of algorithms and a wide variety of techniques that have sometimes names that are difficult to understand. So I wrote them here. You will see often the mention to artificial intelligence, machine learning, asymmetric mapping, and different kind of models. Yeah, models that are called bottom up, top down. Well, there is a lot of terminology, a lot of analytical techniques here. We are not going into the details of those techniques, because what matters to us as statisticians is the end product, the grids. Just for your information, in the next slide, we are presenting some definitions about some of the terminology that is used. We refer to output scale at the size of the grids. Whether it's 30 meters, 250, or 1,000 meters, this is the output scale. We refer to an estimation process as unmodeled when the data sets are created through direct disaggregation of what we see from the air. But we can also sometimes rely on light models or very, very highly modeled designs. These are very technique topics. We are not going to go into these topics, but these are things that you need to know. This is an example. This is an example of one of the grids generated by one of the providers, the GHSL. And actually, what you see here is the area of Ankara, Turkey, that was generated by one of G. As you can see, the enumeration areas, the equivalent to our enumeration areas, are those little rectangles that you can see. This picture is in perspective, but if you could look it from exactly above, they would be squares. This is the map of Ankara, the capital of Turkey, from the air. In the next slide, you have another example. This is in Afghanistan. It is an interesting example because in Afghanistan, as you can imagine, censuses are not easy to find. Yeah? And the kind of information that we can have available from the providers are things such as, the size, some estimates of the land use, but most importantly, the population. An estimate of the population, in this case, in this particular area, 11,000 people, with a decimal point, because these are estimates. So this is, after this introduction, I believe that I will leave the floor to Samet, who will present to us some of the process that we follow for a typical household survey. I mean, once we have access to those grids. Samet, over to you.
Thank you, Juan. Now I would like to continue with the more deeper details about the grids. Here, as you see in the screen, this is one of the examples. The grids was developed by the World Pop, and we tried to show it to you for Ankara. As you see, there are some grids, the EAs, the square rectangular shapes, and all of them has some population estimates inside. The darker colors means that there are more higher population, but as you see in these areas, the gray scale, the lighter colors means that there are less population. But as you see in this is an interesting example. As you see in this slide, there are also some block of buildings, but they are not counted as a population in the grid estimates. So in this slide, we would like to also emphasize that this gridded population data is not a perfect sampling frame, but it helps to you a lot when you do not have any up-to-date censuses, or you don't have any census for developing a household survey, especially in the countries or in the regions, in the cities, which is developing, which some residential areas are developing recently. You may not cover all the population in the gridded population data, because these providers like GHSL, like Landscan, like the other providers, they update their gridded population data sets every year, not every month or every week. So you may have some coverage error, but we will discuss the other advantages and the disadvantages of gridded sampling in the next slides. Actually, in here, I would like to present you the steps of the methodology. The steps of the methodology is not different than the typical household survey design. As you know, to have a probability sampling, you need to have a sampling frame. You either use the census data, or you try to develop your own frame to have a probability sampling. After this stage, depending on the nature of survey and the objectives of survey, as you know, you are stratifying your frame and the sample, and then you continue for the next stage, which is the selection of primary sampling units. In here, in the gridded population sampling, as a primary sampling unit, we select the grids, these rectangular shapes. And after this stage, what we do differently from the typical household survey is, as Hakan mentioned in the earlier stage of this presentation, we are using the satellite images. Why we are using these satellite images? We are using it because we are trying to identify the buildings and the dwellings by visual inspection of these images. Why we are doing it? By doing that, we are able to list of the all dwellings or the buildings, and we are able to get their georeferences, the XY coordinates. And then this helps us to make a database of the all and we are uploading these details to our system, and then the field team is going to the field and conducts the listing on the basis of these identified buildings and dwellings. Why we are doing in that way? Actually, the first thing is this saves some time, because the satellite images are usually up to date, as Hakan said earlier, and it's accessible. And by doing that, we are shortening the time spent on the field for listing, and the listing team is not required to sketch any map for listing purpose. So these are the big gains in the methodological steps. And then what we do is, after implementation of listing, then we identify which buildings, dwellings are residential areas or business offices or business units. Then we get a list of the eligible households for our main survey. And in the next stage, as a secondary sampling unit, we select the households, and then we initiate the survey implementation. Actually, as you see, this is not too much different than the typical survey flow, but the major difference is the inspection of satellite image and the way that we design the listing activity. In the implementation, based on our experiences of this methodology, we implemented this gridded sampling methodology in more than 10 countries, mainly for the World Bank. And what we noticed is this methodology is not difficult to implement, and it is relatively straightforward to implement, especially in a low capacity field environment. When I say low capacity field environment, I mean that the infrastructure, the internet infrastructure, or for example, for the listing, you need to sketch a map if you don't use this kind of GIS supported system. But for the gridded sampling methodology, if you support it with GIS, you don't need to sketch a map, because you do all these things digitally on the desk, and you don't need to do them on the field. And what we received as a feedback from the field teams in different countries is by providing a tablet to them and navigating them directly to the selected households is relatively easy for the team to access the households and to find the way to go to households and implement the data collection. Because what we do is we are uploading all these households related information to the database, to our copy system, and the enumerator is navigating to the selected household directly by using offline and online maps. You are not supposed to have an internet connection. And by this way, we can also monitor the location of the interviewer, where he or she did the interview. Is it the right place, or is how much is it far from the original place? If we design the survey in this type of methodology. Of course, this methodology has some advantages and disadvantages, because we are not using any up-to-date census data, but this is not happening in most of the countries. So we usually go for census, but we are trying to address the shortcomings. So what are the
Samet, we lost your voice.
Samet, we cannot
we
hear
lost
you.
your voice. Samet, we lost your voice. Juan, can you hear Samet?
No, I cannot.
Okay. It seems we don't hear Samet, and he doesn't hear us, but I continue from here on. Samet was talking about the advantages and disadvantages of the grid sampling. Especially advantages, actually, he mentioned where there is no, the main advantage is when there is no sampling frame, you can easily develop a frame by using the grid, especially on the household surveys or business surveys. You can include also other map-based data as a stratification layer. I will give an example for the case in Angola soon. In addition to this, it minimized any bias might come or might be produced by the enumerators. And it is relatively cheaper, cost advantages compared to the full listing by using the traditional methods. Of course, there are also disadvantages or challenges. First of all, the frame, the quality of the frame, depending on the type of the imagery, satellite imagery, or additional information used by the producers. Therefore, if you want, before using or before deciding the grid type, grid provider information, you need to test and you need to search the type of the grid, such as if you are using grid data for Eastern Africa, I will use grid 3 population, grid 3 service provider, and GSH data such as for European part of the world. But these providers are changing their or updating, improving their methodologies daily. It is better to follow them closely. It also requires some GIS and remote sensing skills. However, this is also now it's not very disadvantage or a challenge now, because most of there are also, I mean, not most, but there are cost-free satellite imagery processing or GIS application software like QGIS. It is simple and it is open source software, and it is free. Therefore, it is not a large challenge now. Perhaps I can continue with the some country examples. Samet, can you continue with the slides? Samet, can you continue with the slide number 16, country examples? Country examples? Yes. As UDA Consulting, actually, we have been using the satellite imagery or gridded population techniques since 2015 very effectively or very largely. We conducted many surveys for many different international organizations in different areas. But given that we don't have much time, I will give you a few examples. We are currently using the GIS and satellite imagery in two ongoing projects of UDA Consulting in Iran and Azerbaijan as well. But we are currently presenting you three examples. The first one is Tunisia. Next slide, please. The World Bank wanted to conduct a survey to understand the poverty of the forest and non-forest households and compare them in northern Tunisia, in two provinces of northern Tunisia called Northwest Tunisia and Central West Tunisia. Of course, there is no such a sampling frame to understand which houses belong to or close to the forest or not. And what we did is the following. We first stratify the households or the grids by measuring the distance to the nearest forest body. So if a grid is close to a forest area less than 5 kilometers, then it is accepted as a forest depending or forest beneficiary village. And if a village is far from any forest body more than 5 kilometers, then it is not a forest village. This was the definition decided. We use GHSL grid data, which includes population per grid and also type of the location, which is urban and rural. So by using these four parameters, we managed to stratify all the grids in the area, in the survey area. That means, in other words, we developed the sampling frame. Next one, next slide, Samet. Before that one, before that one, yes. Yeah, this slide shows you the sampling frame, full sampling frame. As you see, there are four stratas. Two of them are forest villages, and two of them are for non-forest villages in two different provinces. The next one, please. And this is the sampling frame on the satellite imagery, over the satellite imagery. We found the forest areas of Tunisia from the government sources as a GIS file. Next one. And we selected the samples randomly. 120 grids out of 2,230 were randomly selected by using PPS methodology. Now I leave the floor to Juan to mention about the PPS methodology.
Thank you. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, but it's coming.
Yes. When you see my screen, please tell me when you can see my screen.
No, I think maybe you can continue from Samet's presentation.
Yeah. Let me try again.
Yes, let's continue from here.
Okay. Well, no, but you cannot, because I wanted to present an Excel.
Yes.
Let me try again, and if not, I will. You still cannot see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. You can see my Excel.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please tell me if you?
We see only the screen where we have the
Yeah.
WebEx.
We don't see the Excel file, Juan.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Let me see if I can.
Yes, you click the Excel file on the left.
No?
No, we see all the screens. You just focus on the Excel one.
Yeah, this is what I am trying to do. Sorry. So maybe if I share my application, no. Okay. Well. Well.
Yes, I think we see now.
You can.
We saw briefly. Yeah. We saw briefly your Excel file.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Then again, because I So you can see?
No. No, we don't see it.
Well, okay. Well, I'm sorry. I will stay in then, and I will just explain to you in words what I wanted to show you, in Excel. So So, Samet, can you please present slide 20? Yes. Okay, what I wanted to show to you basically was how does the PPS selection, the probability proportional to size, selection of grids is conducted when we use grid sampling. And basically, we do exactly the same that we used to do with the standard methodology. When the enumeration areas were area units, here the enumeration areas, the equivalent to enumeration areas are cells. Yeah? And typically, it is an operation that we can perform easily in Excel. There is nothing extraordinary about that. There may be a few things that we have to be more careful about with grid sampling than with the standard methodology. In the standard methodology, normally our area units tend to be roughly of the same size, roughly, because they come from the census where there is an effort to make the census enumeration areas approximately the same size. With grid sampling, we don't have that. With grid sampling, we can have some cells that are that have a very large population, other cells that have a very small population. What you can see there in the column total households. You can see that there is a very wide variety of areas, and actually we can have many areas with zero population. And this is what happens with satellite imagery. Many parts of the planet still have no population at all. So we may need to do a little work with the grid sample frame before actually conducting the selection of the primary sampling units. It is not complicated work, but it may be, it is some work. Yeah? Because I cannot show you I wanted to show you in action how do we conduct the PPS selection after that. But if you are curious, you can find the details at the bottom of the screen in the United Nations Manual for Houses. You can download for free, and there in chapter 15, you will see a description of the PPS selection methodology that you can use. So this is what I wanted to say. This PPS selection is not different from what we do usually, but it is done on a frame that is not our standard frame. Over to you, Sam.
Okay. Next slide, Samet. Until now, what we did, actually, we used grid information to develop a frame. The grid includes population and type of the location readily and available for everybody. Then you can add different layers on this information on grid by using GIS techniques, such as what we did in Tunisia. We calculated the distance between each grid and the nearest force body. Or you can do this for a different survey, such as if you want to calculate the distance between each household and nearest water body, or nearest dangerous zone or disaster zone. So you can do anything. You can add different layers if you have different information which is readily available on paper maps. You can transfer to the electronic version as well, which I will show you soon. But then what we need to do in each selected grids in Tunisia, we had to make a listing, full listing. However, in the actual, while doing the ground survey, ground listing study, there is no border. There is no 250 by 200 meter borders on the ground. So the surveyor may easily lose the directions and do the listing in the different areas. In order to avoid this, we use satellite imagery and mapped each building within the each selected grid. As you see on the screen, each building is mapped and numbered. And these numbers, for each building there is a number, go up, Samet, and there is, we can easily understand, we can easily find the XY coordinate, latitude and longitudes. Why we do this? We program these XY coordinates to data collection application, such as we are using UDA-CAPI, which is also developed by UDA Consulting. It is our product. We can easily register select all the XY coordinates in the selected grids and give to the surveyors, program them, and then surveyor go exactly the exact locations for each building. In this way, we avoid that the surveyors go different addresses or they lose time to find the exact location of the grid and also listing all the buildings within the grid, or they don't miss any grid, any building within the selected grid. So we are 100% sure that they listed everything. And we can also monitor their actions on real time through the UDA-CAPI dashboard, that if they are really going to the exact location or that. Then afterwards, after the listing completed, we randomly select households. In the Tunisia example, the UDA-CAPI application automatically selected 10 households and assigned to the surveyors directly, so that we didn't lose time and the surveyors didn't left the village or the location and waited for sample selection. Instead, the program did automatically and assigned the selected samples to each surveyors. And then the surveyors went to the again selected sample by using the XY coordinates automatically done by the application, which is called UDA-CAPI. In this way, we are 100% sure that the surveyors went to the selected location. What is the alternative for this? I mean, sometimes some people, they prefer random walk, but as you know, in the random walk methodology, you don't know, I mean, you don't know how the surveyor selects the building or the households. Therefore, it brings a bias, a selection bias in the random walk methodology. But with this methodology, we completely avoid any bias that might be introduced by the survey. Next example. I'm trying to be a little fast because we are now getting close to the 45 minutes. The next one is about in Armenia. Armenia, again, we conducted a survey for the World Bank. The objective was again household poverty analysis and the difference between urban and rural areas. Actually, there were three stratification: Yerevan, urban, and rural. And the idea was to select samples randomly in different parts of the country by using also different other stratification criteria and conduct the survey. However, there was no frame in Armenia. Therefore, we used again grid sampling, but this time we use 1 kilometer grids instead of 250. We usually use 1 kilometer grids in the rural areas and 250 or 100 meter grids in the urban areas. For the ones who are interested in more details, we can organize a specific one-to-one or another in meeting. The next example is in Angola, and this time the problem was to understand, or the objective of the survey was again household level poverty survey, but what we did here, more from the creative point of view, we added another layer to the grids by using the poverty map of Angola. What we did was the following: we transferred available poverty data to the digital maps, and then we combine these information with the grid information to develop a sampling frame, which includes three strata: high poverty, moderate poverty, and low poverty locations in Angola. And then we selected the samples accordingly. So overall, what we are trying to tell you is that it is possible to use information technologies, especially satellite imagery and GIS, to develop probabilistic sampling in the areas, in the locations, in the countries where there is no reliable sampling frame. And given that this information technology is completely free or very cheap, it brings two advantages for you, two main advantages for you. A, it is more reliable statistical surveys that you can conduct under even there is no frame. B, it is cheaper and less time consuming. So I finish here, but of course we wait for your questions if you have any. And I see some questions in the chat box.
Hi, Hakan. I can tell you the questions.
Okay, Samet, okay. You go
Yeah.
ahead, please. Yeah.
Yeah. The first question is from Artura, from our participants, and he asks, examples shown are from the urban areas. Do you have any examples of rural agricultural areas? This is the question from Arturo.
Yeah,
So Hakan or
actually,
Juan, who would you like to respond?
I can start one. Actually, the one in Tunisia includes both urban and rural areas. We conduct the survey in the rural areas of Tunisia and urban areas both. And the one in Armenia includes both urban and rural areas. In the rural areas, we use 1 kilometer grids, and the urban areas, 250-meter grids. Specific for agricultural surveys, we can suggest 1 kilometer grids. And I know Arturo from Peru. Thanks for the question, Arturo. As we discussed in Peru, I think it is ideal to use 1 kilometer grids in Peru. Thank you.
The another question is from Hegina Manasyan from Armenia. This question is for you, Juan. How the weights are introduced if we use the gridded sampling methodology?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Of course, the weights are introduced first and foremost as the reciprocal of the selection probabilities. And what we have tried to emphasize is that grid sampling is probability sampling. Yeah? And we have to keep track of the select probabilities in all stages. In the first stage, of course, if we select the grid with PPS, we have to keep track of those selection probabilities. In the second stage, also, we have to account for the number of households and buildings in each grid that we enumerate, and the weights normally are computed as in any other household survey as the inverse of the selection probabilities. So in that way, this is scientific sampling, not different from in the standard methodology.
Okay, thank you, Juan. Another question is about UDACAP application freely available. This question coming from the UNICEF headquarters, Nazim Gashi. I think I can respond to him. You can check the UDACAP website. We have some features to use freely. but for some features, you need to pay a small amount of money to use the UDA copy. You can check out UDA copy, and we can also send you the details, Nazim Gashi. Thank you. Another question is for Hakan, from again Hegine. Which are the steps if the location is a multi-apartment building? Please also elaborate on developing sampling frames for the businesses. So two participants are asking if these gridded sampling can be used for firm surveys. Juan or Hakan, who would you like to respond?
Juan, please, you start. I can continue, no problem.
Okay, good. Okay, and that is a very good question, because from satellite imagery, you cannot see households. You only can see buildings or things that look like buildings. So under a roof, in one building, you can have one household, or you can have many households, or you can have 0 households. And this is where the importance of the in the ground becomes evident. Yeah? In the listing operation, we not only have to account for every building that we see from the air. In the listing operation, we have to go into each building that is used for residence and actually list every household in the building. Yeah? So in that sense, and this is why I emphasized at the beginning, the importance of the household listing operation is exactly as important as it was in the standard methodology. It is more reliable because because we can control the completeness of the listing operation more easily. The second question was about business surveys. How can we use this in business surveys? Well, I believe that this depends a lot on what kind of business surveys are we considering. If the business survey on small businesses, informal businesses, this is probably a very, very good alternative to the use of a business register, which is often not easily available. For the big businesses, probably it is better to try to rely on a business register or to develop a business register or for big businesses. I don't know if this answer to your questions. Over.
Yeah, I can make a few additions. One, we actually, regarding your first question, Hegine, about multi-apartment building, in Ethiopia, we did a similar case in Ethiopia. What we did the following. If a building has less than 5 floors, if apartment less than 5 floors, we selected one household randomly. Actually, the UDA copy did all these things automatically. If the apartment has between 5 up to 10 floors, 2 households. More than 10 floors, we selected randomly 3 households. Of course, all these things can be discussed and in a more statistical perspectives. But what we did, and in an agreement, of course, with the World Bank approval, that methodology. Regarding the establishment surveys, yes, it is easy. It is possible to do, but again, the listing is needed. You know that in most of the countries in the world, there is no reliable establishment frame. Such as we recently submitted a proposal for a Somalia, and we know that there is no establishment frame. But what you can do is the listing, and in this way, by using the satellite imagery again, you can list not only the formal firms, but informals as well. Yes, this is my question. Answer, sorry. Hi,
Okay,
Samet.
another question coming from the Kredi, and is there an example of using this study to study migration settlements in cities or maybe migration flows?
Actually, I can try to respond on this. Yes, it is possible to do this. But this depends on again the exact question about the migration. It is forced migration or refugee cases. What I can tell you is that we use satellite imagery and grid sampling for refugee type of studies in Turkey and currently in Iran, and we selected the samples by using of course, grid information supported by the additional data sets. And this, such as poverty, if you know that in most of the cases, refugees in Turkey, they are settled or migrants in Iran, they settle outskirts of the cities. And by using such information, we made a stratification of the settlements over, such as Tehran city. We divided the Tehran into three different zones, and selected the samples from the most migrant hosting parts of the Tehran based on that information. I hope I answered your question.
And may I add, Hakan, to your answer, just a small comment. In most migration surveys, we have to distinguish two kinds of migrants: the migrants that are in camps, in settlements, and the migrants that are mixed with the host population. For the migrants in camps, my answer would be that grid sampling is probably not comparable, but much better than the standard methodology. Yeah? Because in the camps, when we dispose of recent satellite imagery, we can actually distinguish buildings, and normally the buildings are either containers or tents, and almost always you can be sure that under one tent there is one household only. So I would say for migrants in camps, this is probably your best option. For migrants out of camps, for the migrants that are mixed with the host populations, I would say that the only answer for that is a very good listing operation with stratification in the second stage, where as a part of the household listing operation, we ask the question whether you are a migrant or not. Over.
Okay. We have two questions from Ahmet Sinan Türk Yılmaz. The first one is, did you have any chance to validate experiment of zero size grids in grid frame, but non-zero in the reality, which would give a zero chance to be selected? Maybe Hakan or myself can respond to this question. Hakan, would you like to say something?
Samet, you start and I continue. Yes,
Okay.
I contribute.
Actually, so far we were not able to experiment the grids who are estimated with zero population. This was not done before, but I believe that there are many cases that the grid has zero estimated population, but in the reality they might have more than zero population, but we don't have any figures yet. I think that the literature will focus on this kind of accuracy related things in the coming years, because since this methodology is being implemented by many agencies, then these problems will occur, and the people will work on that. And another question is, what is the strategy to include structures crossed by grid borders? So what happens if one structure is overlapped by two grids? This is the question, I think.
Border structures, yeah.
Yeah.
Which you can see on the screen now.
For example, here, what is our structure? If this building is the grid is crossing this building, what happens to this building? should we count it in here or should we count it outside of this grid? This is the question coming from Sinan. Ahmet Sinan Türk Yılmaz.
Actually, what we do, if the majority of the building is within the existing current grid, we count in this grid. Such as this one, majority of this building in this current grid. So we count it here. If majority was in the other at the other side, we would do otherwise. Such as here, majority of this building is here in the next grid. So we didn't include in this one. This is our strategy, Sinan. But of course, can be a long debate and it can be a different approach. Probably there are also literature on this, but this is currently the strategy we are implementing. And we can easily measure the how much portion of the given building is in which grid by using the GIS techniques. Yes.
Juan,
This-
do you have any comments on the last question? Would you like to add
No,
something?
not on the last, but on the question before, I may want to add that the problem of the empty cells or the cells that appear to be empty from the population estimates and are not empty in reality is probably a serious problem. But I would say that the problem that is more common is the opposite, is that sometimes you will find areas that, according to the grid population estimates, they have a positive population, and in reality, you have nothing. I would say that this is a more common problem and something that you have to be prepared to face, when you use grid sampling techniques. Oh.
I think the questions are now over. We don't have any further questions from our participants. So maybe we can close the webinar.
Is there any other question and from anyone? Any more contribution? I see none. Are you sorry? There is one more question from
Yes.
Mr. Nazim Gashi.
Have you considered using grid population sampling instead of grid spatial sampling? So instead of using grids of area, use population size. Instead of
No, but this is what we do.
Yes, what we do is the following. Yes, exactly. We use grids.
We don't use the physical area of the grid as a measure of size. The measure of size is the population estimate.
So we use actually total population or amount of population only in each grid as a sampling frame, as an information. Isn't it? I hope this responds to your question, Mr. Nazim. Okay, thank you. If there is any other question, we can conclude the session. Thank you very much for your attention, participation, and I would like to thank to Mr. Juan Munoz and also Samet Şahin for their contributions. And I would like to also remind all the participants that our email addresses, or you can contact anytime with us if you have any specific question about the grid sampling or using grids in different surveys, including household surveys, establishment surveys, agricultural surveys. We are happy to share our ideas, knowledge as much as we can. So thank you very much for your participation. Wish you all good evening and nice weekend. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for the
Bye.
participation.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. We close the meeting, Samet. Thank you, Juan, again. Wish you a
Thank
very
you.
nice weekend in Chile.
Same to you.
Ahmet.
Goodbye.
Thank you, and take care.
Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye,
Arturo,
everyone.
hope to hear you later. All the best.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye, Arturo.